Have you ever really thought about the food on your plate, where it came from? It's actually the final stop on an incredible global journey. Today, we're going to unpack that journey and explore the massive world of agriculture, the science and art that literally feeds every single one of us.
Okay, let's dive right in. Just picture a single grain of wheat for a second. Its journey, from a tiny seed in the ground to becoming the bread on your table, is a perfect miniature story of how our entire world eats. It's a journey of transformation, and that's exactly what we're breaking down today.
So, how does that transformation from a plant in a field to a product on a shelf actually happen? Well, it plays out across three distinct economic stages.
It all kicks off with the primary activity. That's the farmer, out in the field growing and harvesting the wheat. Then comes the secondary activity, which is where that raw wheat gets processed, milled into flour, and baked into bread. And finally, you have the tertiary activity. This covers all the services that get the bread to you, like the trucks that deliver it and the stores that sell it.
And sitting right at the heart of all this is agriculture. It is the fundamental primary activity. Everything from growing crops to raising livestock falls under this huge umbrella. And put simply, without agriculture, those other two sectors have nothing to process or sell. It is the engine that powers our entire food supply.
You know, it's helpful to think of any farm, no matter how big or small, as a complete system. It's got inputs, it's got processes, and it's got outputs. Let's take a quick look at what that really means.
First up, you have the inputs. This is basically everything you need to get going. You've got the human inputs like seeds, fertilizers, and machinery, and of course, labor. But then you have the physical inputs, the stuff that comes from nature, sunshine, rain, and the quality of the soil itself.
Next up are the processes. This is the actual work. Plowing the fields, sowing the seeds, spraying to protect the crops, irrigating to give them water, and finally, harvesting. This is the stage where all those inputs are put to work.
And what do you get at the end? The outputs. This is the result of all that effort. You get the crops themselves, like wheat and corn, but you also get products from livestock like wool, dairy, and eggs. These are the things that eventually end up on our plates. Okay, so that's the system. But who's actually running these farms? And maybe more importantly, what's driving them? Because depending on their goals, you get two vastly different worlds of agriculture.
And believe it or not, these two worlds exist side by side all across the globe. Understanding them is absolutely key to understanding how we all get fed. On one side, you have subsistence farming. The goal here is incredibly simple. You farm to meet the needs of your family. The main goal is to eat. On the other side, you've got commercial farming. Here, everything, crops, animals, is raised for the market. The goal here is to sell.
Now, subsistence farming itself looks pretty different depending on where you are. There's intensive farming, which usually means small plots of land, simple tools, and a whole lot of manual labor. You have shifting cultivation, which you might know as the slash and burn method. And then there's nomadic herding, where people are constantly on the move with their animals, following the resources.
Commercial farming is just as diverse. You have those gigantic grain farms for crops like wheat or maize. There's mixed farming, which is a really clever way of integrating both crops and livestock. And then you have plantations, huge farms that focus on a single cash crop, like coffee or bananas, usually for export.
But to really see the massive difference between these two worlds, let's forget the theory for a minute and look at two real-world examples: a small farm in India versus a huge operation in the United States.
First, let's head over to a small village in India and meet Muna Lal. His story is really the story of hundreds of millions of subsistence farmers all around the globe.
So Muna Lal works a pretty small plot of land, about 1.5 hectares, and he does it mostly with his family. He might rent a tractor when he can afford it and relies on advice from his friends and community. He grows staple crops to feed his family and makes a little extra income by selling milk from his 2 buffaloes.
All right, now let's jump halfway across the world to Iowa in the American Midwest and meet Joe Horan. And his farm, well, it's a whole different ballgame. This is modern, large-scale commercial farming in action. Joe's farm is a massive 300 hectares. It's all about mechanization and technology. We're talking computers linked to satellites mapping his fields, constant soil testing, huge combined harvesters. This isn't just a farm, it's a high-tech business.
And this chart just puts it all into perspective, doesn't it?
I mean, look at that tiny sliver representing Munalau's 1.5 hectares, right next to Joe Horan's 300. The difference in scale is just staggering, and it changes absolutely everything about how they approach farming.
There's a quote that just sums this all up perfectly. The farmer in the USA works like a businessman, not like a peasant farmer. Joe is running a business using data and technology to maximize his profits. Munalal is focused on sustaining his family, using traditional knowledge and community support.
So the stories of Munalal and Joe Horan, they aren't just about two individuals. They represent the two extremes of a massive global challenge. How do we feed a growing population? This is really the core question of agricultural development.
And the ultimate goal here is something called food security. It has a very specific meaning. It's when everyone, at all times, has access to sufficient, safe, and nutritious food. That is the end game.
And why is this so critical? Because this isn't some small niche industry. A staggering 50%, that is half of the world's entire population, is involved in agriculture. The lives of billions of people depend directly on these systems.
And this all leaves us with a huge question for the future. On the one hand, you have Joe Horan's incredibly efficient farm that can feed thousands. But on the other, you have Munalau's model, which is the reality for a massive portion of humanity. So here's the challenge. How do we build a future that can harness the amazing productivity of the commercial model while also supporting the hundreds of millions of small farmers who are the backbone of global agriculture?